Hey friends, this is post number 2 coming up to my fundraiser for the longest day, which is a fundraiser for Alzheimer's Association. And in the 3 posts I'm offering, this is the second one, I'm just giving some details on yoga postures and modifications for those postures so that they're accessible for everyone. So last post we talked about rounding and arching the spine, also known as flexing and extending the spine. And that's really good for not only stretching the back and opening the chest, but also for learning to hinge the hips. By hinge, I mean tilting and then coming back to tuck the hips. And that's going to help us with our forward bends. So I'm going to show you first this one forward bend called Dandasana. So the legs are straight. We're aiming for a flat back. Now, for a lot of people, that's going to be really difficult without some kind of support under the hips. So I have a yoga bolster. You could use a big pillow. You could use a folded blanket. I just put it there right under my hips. And that gives me a little boost so that I can kind of tilt my pelvis more. You can stay here and prop behind you with your hands. Some people like to reach up. And so what we're aiming for is at least a 90-degree angle with the hips. And if you can't get that, it's all right. What you're really wanting more is keeping the spine, especially the lumbar spine, lengthened. Notice what your feet do here. You can wiggle the toes. You can point them, you can flex them, whatever you want to do. But notice the difference between pointing and flexing. Or maybe you want to do some bending in the knees. I'm not a fan of being super rigid in yoga postures. So I like those little movements. They add some relaxation and some little micro stretches in there. So I think that's great. Dandasana is going to bring us into another forward bend that we're doing later in the video. But before that, I want to show you one of my other favorite forward bends, which is called Prasarita, paddotanasana. And it's a wide angle forward bend. It's going to be a wide stance like this. I'm going to turn it this way. So you can see that if it's tough to come down to the ground with your hands, you can always put blocks there. You could even use a stack of books, whatever. You can use a chair. You don't have to be in your deepest expression of this pose. Even if you're able to go all the way down, sometimes it's nice to just chill out and do a little more relaxed version. I love to go side to side here. I suggest it, especially if your body isn't super warmed up. But even as its own stretch, it adds a little bit of stretching into the inner thighs, to the outsides of the ankles. It's a little different for everyone. You'll pause to one side and to the other. But the main point here is whether you have your hands down to the ground, blocks, or a chair, or even a table, you want, again, that flatness in the lower back. So you could bring your hand there. Maybe you need support to bring one hand there, support with one hand, and bring the other hand here. And you want that tilting of the pelvis. It's going to, for some people, it's going to feel like you're sticking your butt out. If that feels really, really tight on the hamstrings, it's always fun to bend your knees. There's absolutely no need to have perfectly straight legs. Bend the knees if that feels better for you. Relax the upper body and ground down through your feet. So I recommend spreading the toes wide and just let your feet spread and press down into the ground. Once again, all those little tiny movements I think are so great for releasing tension and just for kind of playing with the pose. And the more we could play with our practice and experiment, the more we could find what's right for our bodies in any given moment. Okay, so it doesn't matter what the angle is here, except for that, or as long as you're lengthening the low back. Awesome. Now, coming back down to Dandasana, or staff pose. Again, if you want to have support under your hips, go for it. And you may have heard of paschimottanasana, which is a seated forward bend. So it starts with Dandasana. And again, if you need to bend your knees, that's fine. But if you take an inhale and really lengthen up through the top of the head, use your exhale to come forward, but only go forward as far as you can without rounding the spine. So there's that tilting of the hips again. If it's only a little, totally fine. It's more about what you feel in your body and not so much about what you look like. Because I'm sure I don't look super graceful right now. So it's what feels good. It's that point where you can still breathe, but you're being a little bit challenged. And I'm showing this now because actually, this is a pose you've probably seen a lot, and you can get a little benefit here. And at the same time, I personally, and a lot of people find it easier to do uttanasana, which is just like this one, but standing on your feet. So, because I'm being sort of low tech and using my phone, my head's gonna get cut off for a second. Sorry. Find your stance, shake your legs out, put your hands on your hips, and then get that hinge. You can bend your knees or keep them straight, but you're hinging and your low back is staying long. And you come down, and if you're super loose in the back of your legs, you might be able to hang. And if you're not, no big deal. You can come to that chair and just kind of rest your forehead and or your arms, knees bent or straight. And the idea here is that you're really releasing the effort in your upper body. So the work is in the legs. You're spreading your toes, pressing down through the feet. And then you're also perhaps engaging the thighs a little, or you can think of it as kind of pushing the back of your thigh bone backward towards that wall behind you. Now your back might round a little, and that's no big deal. It's just that you want to have a good hinge in the hips so that you're not hanging like this with a super rounded spine. You want some amount of length, and then a tiny bit of rounding is all right. And then when you're ready, it's always nice to bend your knees to come out. Optional, but you can do that. Awesome. So I hope you got some good information there on how a forward bend comes not only from reaching forward, but from that tilting of your hips. So as you go forward, you can think of it as leading with your chest or even your chest and your belly, not so much with your arms and your head. So you're forward bending, but from here. And then your upper body is a bit like a door on a hinge. So that's just a little prep for the upcoming classes. A lot of you may be really seasoned yogis and think, okay, I already know this, and that's fine. But it's kind of nice to visit some, different ways to modify poses and get into the why. Like, why are we doing these postures? I didn't go over that, but actually how we can do them in a way that feels good to us and in a way that feels good, but might not look fantastic. It might not be like Instagram worthy, but who cares? It feels good. It's right for your body. So just that little detail of tilting your pelvis is super helpful for protecting your back and also just kind of putting the stretch in a different place. You can also try it with your back rounded or their legs straight, and it's not a bad thing. It's just a different way to do it. But I do suggest trying it by tilting your hips and keeping the spine long so you can really experience what that's like and do it in a way that feels good to you. So in the next post, I'm going to talk a bit about sun salutations or Surya Namaskar. It's also known as Surya Namaskar. And I want to show some different variations because there's sometimes just one way that it gets done like that. And all these different yoga classes, there's so many different variations you could do. That might be better for you. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Share it with your friends and look in the description of this video if you want to know more about my fundraiser. Thank you.